Welcome to the Better Events Podcast. Join two event strategists, Logan Clements and Mary Davidson, who believe we can all create, host, and attend better events. In this podcast, you will learn about event strategy and actions that you can use today as an event host, planner, or manager. Hear directly from the people who are creating innovative and inspiring events today and tomorrow, and grow your business along the way. Now, let's get started, and thanks for listening to the Better Events Podcast.
Well, welcome back, guys, to another episode of the Better Events Podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Logan Clements, and I'm joined by my colleague, Mary Davidson, and we are very excited. Our theme of always being excited about our guests continues, because today we have a very special guest with us. Mary, do you care to introduce who she is?
Yes, absolutely. Well, thanks for joining us again, everyone. This week we have Allison Pieter, and she is the founder and president of Cassis Productions. And I'm going to read a little bit of her bio, and I think it really gives a great background of Allison and her experience. So we're going to dive right into that. So Pieter has been producing in-person, hybrid, and virtual events for more than 2 decades and has worked with organizations and brands including Equinox, Freeform, Hulu, BYU TV, Rebel Girls, The Wrap, Radio Hall of Fame, KSM Cares, UC San Francisco, and California Department of Education. Prior to launching her business, Pieter was executive director of marketing and events for Premier Networks, which is a subsidiary of iHeartMedia. Pieter also joined the company in 2004 as director of event planning, leading all event marketing and branding efforts for Premier, as well as producing national meetings and events across multiple companies within the organization. During her tenure, in addition to producing hundreds of events all across the country, Pieter helped the company successfully launch a new division via a series of nationwide activations. So without further ado, we'd love to welcome our wonderful guest, Allison. Hello.
Hi.
Thanks so much for joining us. Is there anything that you'd like to add in about your intro?
I think that pretty well sums it up. Basically, I've been doing events for most of my life, including a lot of my childhood. If you have a parent that does events as you grow up, you will find it's a fantastic internship program. Although the pay is nothing, but the experience is immeasurable. I highly recommend it. I've really seen so many different types of events across my, more than 20 years in this business. Started producing virtual events more than 20 years ago, before they were in fashion. For those of you who don't know, you used to have to dial up from your phone line to get onto the internet with your computer. And that's actually when we started producing them. So thankfully, the technology has caught up with the ideas behind all of the great programming. I've been on the corporate side. Now as a business owner, I'm on the third-party independent planner side. So I've really seen a lot through the years, and I just love our industry. And I thank you so much for having me on today.
Yeah, Allison, we're very excited to have you. A little bit of context for why we asked Allison here for our listeners. Allison and I, we've worked together for the same kind of experiential creative agency before, not on the same project, but we're kind of adjacent. And she's also very good friends with one of our friends of the pod, Jacqueline Sobel, who was one of our guests from season 1. She's in episode 3 about COVID compliance at your event, which I'm just going to shamelessly plug it because it was a very relevant episode at the time and still is very relevant today about talking about COVID compliance as we start doing more in-person things. So we were just really excited because I think Allison really embodies a lot of what we love on the podcast. It's your energy, Allison, to collaborate and how open you are to sharing knowledge and helping other event pros grow. You have been on the end of some of my own phone calls asking for advice or tips or things. And that's just a theme we have here on the podcast, is that power of community. So I am so excited to talk to you today.
Well, thank you. I think community is one of the huge pluses of what we do. I mean, it's not what necessarily our topic. We'll get into that in a moment, right? But I love supporting other event producers. I loved our conversations, right? And that you knew that when there was a question, you could just pick up the phone and call, or as we're all working to bid projects, execute projects, that we have this great network of people that you can say, oh, who do you have for this that you love? Or, how did you do this? And it really is such a different industry, I think, than so many. And it's one of the reasons I love it, because I have so many great relationships that have come out of that. So just adding that in, even though that's not what we're here to talk about.
No, but I think it ties into it, because I will say, we're talking about embracing your value and your worth as an event pro for this episode. And I mean, just sitting here thinking about it, you got me thinking about like the community that we have. And all of the people I know who have embraced that power of community are all benefiting. Like there is no one I know that has been, dramatically burned by embracing the ability of leaning on those around you. If anything, I think the biggest problem we all have is we're like too busy, which is a great problem to have. And just that's a shout out to our listeners that we're always looking for more good people to help us do things. So yeah, I think that's something that's super powerful.
I agree. I think I'm sure we've all run into different kinds of people, but in this industry, there's either people like us who are very collaborative, which we love, and then there's people who aren't. And those, I don't know about y'all, I personally tend to stay away from folks like that. I believe there's enough, look at what a great, robust industry we have. And thankfully, it's coming back better and stronger every day. Some days inch by inch, but it is coming back. And so, the idea that we can all build something more together is so true, right? And there's really enough business and events for everybody. Your success does not mean I have less success. And if I can help your success be greater, then maybe together we can continue down that road, and create something even more awesome and fantastic. So I'm one of the collaborative types, and I know most people in this industry are. But I think it's really, it really talks about how we succeed, because no one person can produce an event on their own. It doesn't matter the size, right? It doesn't matter the scope. You need all kinds of different people. And you have to be willing to ask questions, but also you need to be able to stand, your ground and know what you bring to the table and know your worth and know your value. And sometimes with clients, that can be an interesting conversation. And sometimes with partners, that can be an interesting conversation. But I think it's key to being successful in this industry. We have to, as we talked about, embrace your value and embrace your worth, and not be afraid to stand in that spot and proclaim it and take it, which I know I was very bad at doing in the beginning. Especially when I first became a business owner, it took me a while to really understand that people will treat me as I allow, right? And especially when someone is hiring you, obviously, when it comes to the power dynamic of you and a client, your client is always in charge, right? And the end goal should always be what's best for the success of the event, which is the filter through which I look through, all the decisions that I make for clients. But you still have to know that you bring something awesome and amazing to the table. And if your client could produce the event without you, we all know they would, because they would save money. But if they're reaching out, then they have a need, and you have a solution to that need. So hopefully, and ideally, it could be a great fit.
I love that. And I love how all this is just tying in so well together, which then I guess leads us to one of the questions we had, which is, when you are working with clients, because the end goal, like you said, is the success of the event, but how do you navigate the power dynamic between you and the client, especially in our industry, and especially for times when maybe you're not totally in agreement with the end goal? I mean, obviously they both want the event to be a success, but sometimes it doesn't always feel that way. So what are your thoughts on that?
At the very beginning of every project, I ask clients several questions. I ask, what's the goal of the event? Because some of the output is different if you're looking to raise money versus if you're looking to create a marketing event, right? Versus if you're a corporate annual executive, retreat, et cetera. So I always ask what the goal of the event is. I always ask how events fit within their company's organization structure. Is it a revenue source? Is it, again, like coming out of the marketing budget? Because that will help drive some of the decisions that happen down the line. And the last one is I ask how events fit within their industry. So those are always the three questions I ask up front before things get confusing. And I put them somewhere that we can all view them at any time. And I say to them, I ask these questions because then when we're looking at making some challenging decisions, we can refer back to these as a guidepost or 3 guideposts as to how we make the best decision, right, to serve the organization and to serve the event based on your needs. So I have found over the years before I asked those questions, sometimes it would get a little more complicated, but it really, I don't want to say it doesn't help to simplify it, but it helps to clarify it, right? So if there is a problem or there's a challenge and you and your client see differently, we can refer back to those and say, okay, does this still apply? Or have the goals changed? In which case, let your partners know. But I find that asking some key questions like that at the front certainly clarifies some of those more difficult conversations down the road. And in answer to your power dynamic question, look, the client's always in charge. They're the one paying the bills. However, they also rely on us for our expertise, right? They are not event producers. They don't know the details of what's involved. They only know what they want to see. So I try to remind myself when there is a difficult conversation, or ask myself, is it something that's going to materially affect the outcome of the event? Or is it something that is just about my pride, my ego, my, humility? And I try always to keep everything focused on the event. And I think it comes in handy when you're working with multiple partners. I have said so many times I've lost track to when I have vendors that perhaps, have maybe are trying to take charge. I say, look, we both have the same end client and we all have the same end goal. So how do we get there for our client? Because it's really not about us. I mean, it is, but it's really not.
Yeah, I think that's a good way. I like what you said there of having it somewhere that is visible to you and the client. I think, I know that's something I personally do myself, but I don't think I honestly put it somewhere that is like openly referable. But then it does give you a good thing to be like, see, things have changed, versus saying, according to my notes, I think things have shifted. Because getting down, and we have a whole episode about that. Mary, that was episode 2. Did we talk about that?
Let's
or
start
episode
with
1?
why.
Yeah.
I think that was episode 1 or 2. Yeah.
Might be
I don't know, after our intro, but we mentioned
it's
that.
one of our most popular. But talking with clients about getting down to your why, because you can want to accomplish everything, but you really need to narrow things down. And that, especially when we're getting brought in as external folks, it helps focus that conversation. But focusing a little bit on us, I feel like as a self-employed event pro, or a contractor or a freelancer, it's really hard not to link your like rate and income to your self-worth. So I'd love to hear your take on that. And like, have you been able to separate the two, or what have been some tactics that have helped you kind of reconcile that? Because I know that's something I've struggled with.
I think as event professionals, we are all very caught up in tying our identity to what we do. Or most that I have met. Obviously, nothing is a blanket statement, but I think that we are all guilty of that from time to time. So for me, I try to remind myself when I do get, especially in sort of that last month or two of the event, when you're really in the middle of it, I try to make sure that I take breaks, that it's not 24/7 about the event, that I see friends, family, make sure to exercise, make sure to eat well. We all love to reach for, whether it's salty or sweet. I know chocolate's my thing, but I try to make sure that I have the right energy to function, because it all ties together, right? If it's all about the event and you can't function as a human, then inevitably all you think about, like you said, your whole worth gets tied up in the event, right? And what we do as event producers is really one small part, hopefully, of who we are as individuals. We're siblings or spouses or partners and friends and children, parents. So I think because what we do is usually with such love, I think it can sometimes tend to fill the entire space. But I just try to remind myself that it is a piece, and a great piece, and I love what we do, and I'm grateful to do it. But it's not all of who I am. But it's taken a long time to get there, to be honest. It's and it depends where you're at, right? When you're in a corporate environment and people are emailing you at 4:30 in the morning, and you're feeling compelled to respond, right? It's taken a lot of conditioning and reminding to get myself to that point.
That's actually a really good lead into another question that we had, and I am super curious to hear your answer about this. You just kind of hinted at it, but because our industry is so all about saying yes, like you were saying, and maybe not having the best boundaries, what are some examples of boundaries that you have learned to set in your work life? I guess above and beyond not actually answering that email at 4 a.m.
And it took me many years to learn to not answer that email at 4 a.m. When by 7 I was mentally exhausted, I finally traced it back to the fact that at 4 a.m. I was checking my email and answering it. Maybe not the healthiest thing. I think you said it, Mary, the first and best thing we can do is to not answer it, right? But I think the second thing is to set, again, we go back to some of these conversations at the beginning, we set the boundaries up front. And I was terrible at this in my beginnings of years as a business owner, and especially at corporate, and I'm much better at it now. if we're 4 months out from the event, provided everyone's limbs are attached and everyone's alive, there's no reason to talk to someone Sunday night at 10 o'clock, right? There just isn't. If we're a week out, okay, that's understandable. So I think having those conversations with clients, with partners, and say, look, please understand, especially now that we're working from home, we're all attached to these, please understand we try to strike a work-life balance. And, as we get closer to the event, the days will get longer. But until then, as a team, we keep a fairly regular 9 to 6, 9 to 5, whatever it is. But the hardest part is then we as event people have to stick to that, right? Because who answers their emails at night if they have time, right? Or who, if they're waiting in line, check something on a weekend. So I find it's harder to hold myself to it than the clients, because once you do set the precedent that you're available anytime, of course they'll take advantage of it because they know you're available anytime.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Logan.
I was gonna say, it's again sometimes easier said than done. I think one of the tools I know I've utilized that I love is Gmail does. I think it's baked into Gmail, but you can also use a tool called Boomerang. But Gmail lets you schedule emails, and I've started to do that now. If I do work on a Saturday or Sunday, because I've been really cognizant whenever I'm utilizing other people, like I have a team, because I don't want to be the person, telling them that I think they need to be on, all weekend. So I'll schedule them so they'll all send at like 8 a.m. on Monday. So I'll write it, I get it out of my head, it's scheduled, I don't have to literally do anything, but it's not hitting somebody's inbox until like normal working hours. Or if I have a team, because I feel like I'm with you, Allison, I've been burned that way, that I'm like, if I'm helping people, again, I'm like, my expectations for tomorrow is not that you're constantly checking your email. I just want you to log on once and check, is something happening, midday? And then other than that, your time is your own, or at least trying to figure out what those expectations are. Because I feel like a lot of it's just implied that we're just going to be on all the time. Because like you said, we have our computers in our hands essentially, but it's not healthy to kind of have that constant, that lack of structure, I would say can kind of burn you a little bit.
And it's a hard conversation to have with clients, right? Because, and especially as we continue to work remotely, which I think in a certain way will be around forever, right? More of us are home business based, but therefore we have clients in different time zones. So if we're 3 hours apart, I've had people call me at, maybe 6 a.m. my time, because they don't think about the fact that, oops, maybe they're not already with their cup of caffeine already working, right? So I think it becomes important for us to establish those guidelines up front. I love the Google Gmail scheduling tool. I agree with you. It's awesome. I use it very frequently, and just to try to keep up our end of that bargain and just not let them, not be available all the time. Obviously, if there's an emergency, it's one thing, right? But I once had a client who I think on week 2 called me Sunday night at 9 o'clock. And the event was 4 months away, and we talked for half an hour, and and sure enough, it didn't get any better.
Oh gosh.
Everything you're saying is like giving me anxiety, like in a good way, but it's because I'm like, I know I do this, and I know I've experienced this, and it's not okay. So I'm just having like flashbacks right now, but this is super helpful. You're totally right.
Everyone listening and watching has had this more than once, right? And we are all, because we are all solution-oriented people pleasers, person type people. We all want to get to the yes and to get that solved and to move on to the next thing. But it's not worth it if it's eating us up inside, right? Or if we're all so mentally exhausted 24/7. We have to step away. We have to take some time and recharge. And there certainly has not been enough of that lately. So hopefully that will be a priority for, more folks in our industry as we're in 2022 and beyond.
Well, and it sounds like it's really important to have those conversations versus just assuming, that people understand what you're expecting and what they're expecting. Do you have any, we've talked about kind of examples of boundaries you set, but do you have any other strategies that you'd suggest for someone who's maybe an event producer, event vendor, who's in an event, they're in the process, already have started working with a client, to have that conversation or to set those boundaries around their work?
I think it's a little of a gentle rip off the Band-Aid. If, usually fairly soon after that happens. So let's say a client calls you late at night, right? The next time you have a scheduled call or the next day, perhaps say to the client, please know that, while we try to be available as much as possible, it's important that we step away for our own mental health. If there is really an emergency, you can contact me anytime. But, if we could otherwise keep our communications to normal business hours, it would be very much appreciated. I'd be grateful. Some clients get it, some don't even realize it, right? Because they're in a different time zone. They don't think about it. But if you don't say anything, it won't change. So and sometimes I find the best way is just in the course of like a weekly check-in or every weekly check-in, perhaps to not elevate it to the point where it's such a big thing, but maybe just make it a note on the agenda and say, hey, by the way, I know you noticed you called last Thursday, and just try to like broach it super gently, and hopefully they'll be understanding. And if not, then maybe you have to decide how long-term you want that client. Right? Because the reality is clients aren't always fits for all time.
Yeah.
And it's a hard thing to admit.
Something so simple as telling people what time zone you're in, because you said we're so remote and different and all over the place, and even if a company is based in Los Angeles, doesn't mean the person you're talking to who works for that company is based in Los Angeles anymore. That's all changed. And that's something that I found helped me with a couple clients that were in different time zones, just acknowledging the fact that I'm in Seattle, I'm on Pacific Coast time. That helped some clients that we're trying to set like 6 a.m., 7 a.m. meetings, which I'm like, for some clients, I'm totally okay to do it. But like, there is a limit to how many times I want to be on a video call at 6 a.m. my time. Yeah. And it was like, and they don't want you on a call at 6 a.m. their time. So, it's kind of that. And for me, it took realization when I confessed to somebody that, yes, I'm on Pacific Coast time. They're like, why'd you say yes? I was like, because we need to have this meeting. And if this is the only time that works, like, I'll do it. But yeah, ideally, if it's a little later. And again, that comes back to people pleasing, because it's just, it's you want to make people happy. But I think at the same time, Allison, you make good points about that balance and, your own worth kind of thing.
A little trick you just reminded me, sometimes I do in emails with new people, is I put PT after like the first several times I email them and suggest times to get together, which is a subtle reminder that that's the time zone you're in, because that, sometimes I'll do the conversion for people, but then they don't realize that I'm in Pacific. So you say, okay, what about 11 o'clock Pacific on Tuesday? And it just is a subtle reinforcement. Maybe they'll ask if they don't know, or, remind them if you've mentioned it. But yes, right? Like you said, we've all said yes to the 6 a.m. call and go, oh my goodness, 6 a.m. camera off.
Yeah.
But again, right, most clients, unless it's like the day before, in which case there's nothing you can do, but we'll be happy to rearrange it. If only they know. So we need to be better advocates for ourselves and really speak up for what we need, and people will treat you as the behavior you accept.
And you also hinted at this earlier, but have you ever had any experiences or heard about any experiences of someone, or I guess, an event professional having to, I don't know if you call it fire a client, but you decide that this is not a good fit. So do you just kind of ride it out and then say, all right, I'm never working with them again? Or what does that look like?
I think it depends on several factors. First of all, I'll be honest, firing a client is the best feeling in the world, because to take and I don't advocate doing it often, but if you're really at that point, it is such an empowering space to stand in, to be able to acknowledge that your business will succeed without that person, and to acknowledge that you don't need or want that person's behavior in your life, and to act on it is amazing. So if someone's really considering firing a client, if you're thinking about it, you probably should. And I would say stand in your space and own it, and you will not regret it. But that being said, I think there's a couple of factors to decide. If it's a one-off event and you're close to the execution of the event, I am an advocate of suck it up, get out your angst over drinks with your friends, right, and move through it. Because I think the long-term health of your business and your reputation, right? We've all had clients that we don't love, but to handle it, to get out of it a month or two or even 3 beforehand, I think winds up doing your own business and reputation and brand more harm than it does good. Not to say that's going to be an easy time period, but I think that, sometimes you just have to get through it. Now, knowing that, the question then becomes, right, then okay, am I going to go back into that arena? And the answer is no, right? If you know it's a terrible experience for yourself, I think it was Maya Angelou who said, believe people when they show you who they are, right? Those people are not going to change in their behavior. So once you get through it, and if you can survive it, don't go back for more. That may be a case where it's better to find a new client. Now, if it's a client that you're doing a series of events for, like what I actually did is I did fire a client once, and it was just very clearly a mismatch of goals and strategies and ways they spent money and priorities and everything else. And I looked at him one day, and we had been touring around a city all day, and he wasn't happy with anything because he hadn't really given me a lot of the information, had changed and wasn't communicated to me. So what we were scoping really didn't fit his needs. And I looked at him and I said, maybe the answer is I'm not the answer for you. And he looked at me so surprised that he just couldn't believe anybody was saying that to them. But in that moment, I knew that I could never please him, right? And I just wasn't the person to make him happy. And I wasn't going to die on that hill trying. There's no one person or client that's worth it. And when you come to the realization that it's just never going to be a match, there's no point in staying. So I said to him, I'll stay until you find somebody else. And like I said, it was a series of events, but I just knew that all I was going to do is bang my head against a wall and never make him happy. So it wasn't going to work out for either of us. But it was great. I highly recommend it if you're really at that point that you just know it's not going to be a fit. Don't waste your time, because the reality is we do have a wonderful, robust industry with clients that are great. And don't waste your times with the ones that really, if you've made the effort, you just know are never going to be happy with your services.
That's really, I think, powerful, hearing an example of letting someone go. Because I think I know that's helped me is where I've found that conflict with clients or vendors. It's often that our values don't align. Like, one of my values is transparency. And if I'm working with a client or a vendor that I'm like, why is it just not clicking? And I realize because they don't want to be transparent about certain things. And that just bothers me. And that's, a me value that I think maybe not other planners might not have that. And so that, again, it's a better fit for somewhere else. But that's always easier said than done to realize it. I feel like you have to experience it once or twice to have that then elation if you're going to step away, that it's not worth it. But
absolutely. You're so right. It takes us a few knocks on the head to realize it hurts.
Yeah. Well, I think we still have time. So we want to do a couple sentence finishers with you, Allison.
Sure.
So first one is, if I had more hours in the day, I would blank.
Cook more gourmet meals. I love to cook, but I tend to do, it's tasty, but like functional, healthy cuisine. But I feel like I'm not the person that does the sauces and the toppings and I would do that. I feel like if I had more time to really prep and focus on that.
We should come to your house.
I know.
Anytime. Spring.
Yeah. There you go.
Definitely. Our next question for you is, your favorite productivity tool is what?
My calendar. I have multiple email addresses, some from clients, some personal, some business, and the calendar on my phone is the only place that I know what my availability is. I also believe for especially virtual events, but I am a big, sender of calendar invites for everybody so that it winds up on other people's calendars so they show up. And I could never do what I do without having all of my calendars in one place. I wouldn't know where I'm headed.
True. You're speaking to my soul right now. Yes. I agree.
I feel like you're speaking event language, and we're like, we live and die by our calendars.
Well, so many of us have multiple email addresses that, like, the calendar on your phone is literally the only place that it all syncs up. So if you want to avoid scheduling yourself to have to be in two places at once, I literally cannot live without it.
All right. Our last one for you is simple advice you can give to a small business owner.
I would say stand in your space and be proud of who you are and what you represent for your business. It took me many years to know my value, to know my worth, to know what I brought to the table and what I bring to the table for every client. And I am much better about communicating that to potential clients and to current clients than I was when I first started. because you're afraid, that everybody thinks there's so many event planners, vendors, rental, whatever aspect of the industry you're in, right? You're not the only person providing that service. And everybody thinks, oh my goodness, there's so many people doing what I do. So you can't be afraid to talk about who you are and what makes you special and your values and your experience. Right? Everything we've done in this business informs who we are and what our business represents and what we represent and the kinds of events that we want to do and the kinds of clients that we want to have. But if you don't tell anybody that, then nobody knows. I used to say I didn't want to own a business because I didn't want to sell. And finally, somebody said to me, you're not selling, you're providing a solution to a need. And that really clicked with me. And it took me years to be able to stand in my space and, say, this is what I do. This is why I charge what I charge. If you don't like it, please, there's 100 other people that can probably do it for you cheaper. Make sure it's a great partnership and a great fit. But I couldn't do that in the beginning because I just didn't have the experience. So once you do it over and over again, eventually you can just stand in your space and be who you are and know your value and know your worth. And it's fantastic. It's a struggle every day to stay there, but it's a really good thing.
I love it. Thank you so much. And thank you just for being here today. I've loved our conversation. Definitely has me reflecting on the importance of value and worth and embracing that. And just along with that, we like to kind of pass it over to you one last time. Is there anything else that you want to add before we wrap today?
I just want to say I'm so excited to see what these coming years are going to look like as we continue to, move forward on in-person, hybrid, and virtual experiences and what those mean. And I'm excited for our industry to continue to come back together. And if you want to follow me, you can always, I'm on Instagram, Cassis Productions. I have a website, cassisproductions.com, which has links to Twitter and Insta and all that. So check it out. And thanks for having me.
Thank you
Thanks
so much,
Allison. This has been amazing. So many gems in there. Oh, so good. But I think, Mary, that brings us to time for our bonus tip, and it's your turn this week.
Woohoo. Awesome. Okay, bonus tip time. So this bonus tip is about the metaverse, which I don't know if you've heard about it yet. It's, becoming more prevalent, especially in the event industry. So this is just my invitation to you to go check it out and see what you think about it, if it's of value to you. But basically, the metaverse is an idea about, it's the 3D world, basically combining like VR and AI. And there is space for that in the event industry. I think it's for a really particular type of audience. So I'll be interested to see how that develops over time. And maybe we can hash it out more on a later podcast episode. But one resource I wanted to point your way if you're interested in learning more, and we are not associated with this in any way, but through the EventMB, they have come out with kind of a booklet about the metaverse where you can just learn and explore. So I'll make sure that we link that in the show notes in case you'd like to check it out. And I'm going to pass it back over to Logan.
Yeah, I always would be like the metaverse. I don't know why it just feels like it's a whole other level. Thanks, Mary. You can follow us on Instagram at Better Events Pod. You can send us an email at bettereventspod@gmail.com. We love the emails we've been getting. I also want to encourage you, if you have a question and feel so inclined and want to record yourself as like a voice memo with a question, we can answer those here on the pod. So send them our way. And as always, we appreciate you for listening. And we're in our season 2. I can't believe it, Mary. But we'll be back in your ears again next Wednesday. Bye, folks.
Thanks, everyone.